All right, so continue here inside of our common text field, which we created at the bottom here, but it's being called inside of our search bar. On action here, meaning when users type search and come here and they want to add something, the keyboard will show up, right? And at the bottom, we'll have this next or arrow button there. So that means that when they click that, we want to validate and do what needs to be done in order to take this information, in this case, the city name they have just entered, and do something with it. So this is all captured here in the keyboard actions, meaning what action they have done right after they've added something. We want to capture that and move forward. Okay. So here is where I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to say if, because I want to validate or check if whatever was entered is valid. If it's not, I'm going to say if it's not valid, and I can do that because remember I have this variable that I created there, which validates really, right? Returns whether it's true or false if we have if the search query doesn't have anything, right? And this is not what I want. I don't know what happened there. Let's say dot is empty. This shouldn't be inside. That's why. It's okay. Let me just remove all of that. Put inside of a lambda and paste it like this. Let's say is not empty, like that. Okay, so that's what we want. All right, so back here, if it's not valid, meaning it's empty, in this case, I'm just going to return like this. So in this case, just return nothing. In any other case, which means then it's validated, then I'm going to invoke the onSearch, right? Which is what we're passing here, right? And we're going to pass a string that was going to be coming from our text field. Pass that along. So I'm going to pass this search query state, that value. Of course, I'm going to trim it so that we don't have excess of things that we don't want. All right. And then once that happened, I'm going to just use again search query state, that value, just to clear everything up. I'm just going to put an empty string like that. So what that means, once we click that next or enter or whatever in our keyboard, we're going to clear our text field. That's what we're doing there. And once that is done, we want to make sure that our keyboard controller, look at that. And I'm going to say hide. So we're going to hide our keyboard controller, which means I need to safeguard with the exclamation point like that. And that's it. And I do realize that we took a long time, to put this together, but it's important to do this way and not trying to do the other way, because number one, we have this capability of reusing this code, reusing these composables, and number two, it just makes it much easier to extend our search bar. If we want to add, for instance, in this column here, another common text, we can add as many as we want. So think in those terms always. Very good. So now we have our search bar fairly ready to be used. Okay, so I'm going to call this inside of our search screen, which is going to be here. All right, inside of this column, I'm going to say search bar. Let's see, search bar. There we go. And then I'm going to pass a few things. Let's make sure that we don't have a different search bar. Right. Because we are using the experimental Compose UI, we also have to annotate that, whatever it's calling it. Let's pass a modifier here. Actually, before we do that, that means we have to allow this to have a modifier. That makes sense. And I'm just going to say modifier like this as a default one. Very well. So now I'm going to be able to pass that modifier. So that fill max width. And I'm going to give a padding of about 16 dp all along. And I want to align everything by saying alignment, compose alignment, of course. I want this to be center horizontally, like that. Very good. Now the beauty also, because it's a search bar, and remember, because we have this on search, and it's the last parameter, and it's a function of our search bar. That means we can use, yes, you guessed it, we can use the lambda, trailing lambda. That's the beauty. And if you do that, you can see we now have this IT, implicit variable that is passed around, which in this case is going to be whatever is inside of our text field, because we're passing it along, right? So we have on search here, when we call it here, we're passing our query value. Okay, so we can use that. We can do whatever we want. So let's go back to where I'm calling. There we go here. Let's say log D for now. And I'm just going to pass this IT like this, which is going to be, like I said, whatever users have entered. All right. Okay, let's see if this is going to work, because that's the whole point. Let's run this. All right, let's click. Aha, look how beautiful this looks. Wonderful. All right, instead of Seattle, let's say San Diego, my wife's favorite place ever. Let's go and say enter. Okay, it's clear now. Let's go to our logcat, and San Diego is showing there. Beautiful. This is exactly what we need. Remember, the idea is as follows. When we hit enter or next, right, in our keyboard, we want to be taken back to our main screen. You can go like this. Let's try again. Main screen like this, and we are going to get, for instance, San Diego, what users have entered, and we're going to repopulate this entire main view with the new city. That is the idea. But one thing at a time, we were able to pass along or get that information in our search, which is good. And now we are going to be able to then take that information, in this case the city name, and pass it along back to our main screen. Now, how do we do that? How do we then get this city name from our search back to our main screen? Weather navigation, as such. So, looks like we have an issue here. I'm not sure why. Oh, right. We have to add experimental even here. Let's do that. Okay, because we're using that experimental API, we have to, anywhere we call it, this also has to be called or added, right? The annotation. Now we have to change the way we have set up our main screen, because the idea, again, is to get that data, the city that was added, and go back to our main screen and repopulate the main screen with the new data, with the new city. So in this case here, we need to pass a variable, we need to pass a data through our composables, right? And in this case, with our navigation. So to do that, it's fairly simple, but we have to restructure a few things. So back to our weather navigation here. In our composable, where we have this main screen, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get it out of there. So I'm going to say val route or route. I'm going to say weather screens as you see there, and I'm going to say main screen.name. So essentially, I'm going to remove this. I removed this and put it there. So now I can call this route like this. Same thing, nothing new. But what's not new, or what is new, I should say, is that now I'm going to put that inside of double quotes to say it is a string, because I want to append something else. So I'm going to say $sign to have the variable, and then I'm going to say / and curly braces as such, and inside I'm going to pass the city variable like this. What that means is as follow. When we call this route here, this main screen, we're going to have just like we have on the web, right? We have, for instance, www.google.com and then / and we can have, for instance, I don't know, city name like this is equal to Spokane or Seattle. Okay, so that's the idea. So what are we doing here? We're passing this city name or city variable along so that we can then pass something when we receive something from our text field. We can pass that variable along, hopefully with some data. That's all we're doing here. Okay, well, it's not the whole picture yet, but that's the idea. Okay, now once we have that, we have to do something else. Because in our composable here, if you hover over, you will see that we can pass other things other than just the route. We can pass the arguments, we can pass the links, and so forth, right? This is good. This is helpful. That means then, as a parameter or an argument, in this case, I'm going to pass the arguments, no pun intended, of course. I did not know that it's called arguments. All right. And in this argument here, it's actually going to be a list of something. It's arguments, not argument. Arguments like this, okay? It's going to be a list of, because we can pass a list of arguments, right? But we're just going to pass one. But in this case, they always allow us to pass, actually, they want us to pass a list. That's no problem. Now, we can't just pass a list like just a string. We need to wrap it around a navigation argument. Okay, so I'm going to say nav argument. All of this is given, as you can see there. We can just use it. And a nav argument allows us to pass, in this case, a string and a nav argument builder to build around that argument that we're passing around. Right? Because all of this, remember, we are putting all of this infrastructure together because we want to make sure that this works with the navigation system. Okay? All right. So for the name, well, what is the name of this variable we're going to be passing? Well, it's going to be city. It has to be exactly the same what we chose here. Now, this could be monkey, could be dog, you know, anything you want, but it has to be the same. Consistency is very important. Okay, so this is also a lambda. We can just put their trailing lambda to say then we need to pass the type that we're passing here. So in this case, it's going to be a string type. Okay, nav string type. What that means is we need to specify what kind of objects, in this case, what kind of values, what kind of pieces of data we're passing. Because you could pass a list of something, you could pass an object, you could pass all sorts of things. In this case, we're saying we want a string type, which is exactly what we're passing. It's just a string. That's all. All right? Okay. It looks complicated, but it really isn't that complicated. All right. Now, inside here, then, this is where we were before. We've seen before this, right? So you see here we have this implicit nav back stack entry, which is just a variable that is we get right from our arguments, actually from our composable. So what this allows us to do is allows us to do many things, such as getting the arguments and so forth. What I mean by that is as follows. So I'm going to actually add a name, call this nav back like this, so we can use it to do what we need to do. So now I'm going to say nav back stack entry object, and I'm going to say arguments. Look at that. It's a bundle, which means it's another structure, another class that allows us to bundle up pieces of data. And you can see the naming is very important, right? Bundle of data. Just think of a package that will contain other pieces of data inside. That's exactly what it is. So we're creating through our nav back stack. We say, hey, let's go ahead and put together this bundle of a box that we can put all these pieces of data. That way we can pass that along, and whoever gets it, they can open as a present, Christmas present, and they can get data. That's exactly what's happening, really, guys. Nothing really too fancy. Okay, so we have the arguments. Wonderful. Then we need to continue and say get string. Now, why and how do I know it's a string? Well, I just said here the type we're passing is a string type. Right? Therefore, it has to be a string when I retrieve that information, when I want to retrieve that data. Right? So I need to pass the key. What is the key? Is city. So I say city. Again, has to be the same name. Otherwise, it's not going to work. All right. So once that happens, I'm going to use the let block. Okay. This let block allows us to run code that will take advantage of whatever is being passed along. So in this case here, when we get that string, well, in this case, we pass the key. That means we're going to get the value. So where is the value? Well, the value is going to be in this block, again, as the IT string there. Ah, interesting, right? All right, that means then I can take all of this other code we had before and pass it all there. Now, the great thing here, look how beautiful this is. The great thing here is that now, because I have this IT, by the way, this IT, what it is again? What is it? Well, this IT is the value, the key value that we are passing along, which is needed because we need that back to our main screen, right? So to facilitate here, I might, in fact, I'll just leave as IT, but if I want, I can just say city like that. Let's just say city. I think that's appropriate. Okay, so now I have the city, the actual value, not right. And so now I'm going to pass it along our main screen. Because remember, the whole idea is that main screen retrieves or gets that city that was added in our search screen, right? That's why we're doing all of this. But how do we pass it along? Well, we say comma, and we pass city like that as an argument. And I'm going to say city. Which city is this one? Now, it's going to complain because you're going to say main screen doesn't know what city is. Of course it doesn't, because we haven't added it. So let's create parameter city, and it's okay. Just add it like this, and we should be good. Okay. And that's it. This is how you pass parameters, pass data through your composables. Let's go to main screen. You notice in our main screen now, the beauty, because we added that city, look at that, and it's nullable. Let's open up like this. What we can do, look how cool this is. I just can't help it. I can say log D so you can see. Okay, and then I can just say city like this. Let's just wrap it with a tag. That's totally fine. We don't mind that. Let's run this. And now you can see when we go to search, add something, go back to main screen, we're going to see the city that was just added. Let's see. Oops, looks like we have a problem. What seems to be right? The problem here is as follows. It says that navigation destination that matches request main screen cannot be found in navigation graph route splash. Okay, so if we go to our splash screen, the reason that's happening is because we've changed a few things actually, right, in our composable. But remember that the main screen is actually called somewhere else, because if you look at, let's go to our splash screen. I think that's going to help. If you look at our splash screen, you will see that after a few seconds, we say nav controller, and then we go to main screen as such. So now it's saying, well, yes, I can go there, but the problem is that you've said that when I navigate to the main screen, I must pass some sort of city, right? Because that's what we said. That's why we're having the issue. So for now, I'm just going to put a default city. So I'm going to say plus. And the way we do this, we are going to put a / like this and put, say, default city, which I haven't created yet. So at the top here, I'm just going to say val default city. Just say San Diego, like that. Now this is going to work, right? Does it make sense? And we have to add it this way because remember, all of these routes are being seen just like links in web development. So we need to put / and then default city like this. Okay, let's run. And you can see, okay, it's working perfectly. Now, it's not saying San Diego here is because somewhere along the way we actually changed this to say Maputo. In fact, I know exactly where that is. If you go to main screen, we added Maputo here. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, now here's the thing. Let's go to search, and I'm going to say Seattle, hit enter, And if I go back, let's see if I see, right. Actually, in order for this to work, I'm getting ahead of myself here. When we navigate, let's go back to our search screen for you to see exactly what we're getting. Right, I'm not doing anything here. All I'm doing, I'm just saying search screen and enter. That's not what I want to do. I want to actually navigate back to our main screen. That makes sense. So all I do, I say nav controller because I have access to a nav controller. I'm going to say navigate. Remember to get the route string 1 like that. And then I'm going to say weather screens, right? Our enum. Oops, let's see. And name, let's say weather screens, main screen, that is, that name. And I'm going to do the same thing we did on our splash screen. I'm going to append our friend that we just added, right? And it's going to be our mcity. Now, in this case here, we say string or it. I'm just going to say mcity like this. Voila, like that. So this is what's going to happen. So we click on search, we add the search. In fact, let's just run and see how this will work. Okay, let's go. I'm going to say Seattle. Hit enter. Voila. We went back. If we go to Logcat, there is Seattle from our main screen. Very cool. If I change to, let's say, Moscow, you should see Moscow there. Look how easy things get now. In our main screen, we said we got the city from our screen, in this case, our search screen. That means then I can take this city and add it here dynamically. Look at this. Look how easy this will look now. I say city, like that. Looks like it needs some wrapping. Add to string, sure. Voila. Okay, look what's going to happen. I'm going to run this. Now, the first default is going to happen because from here it's going to go and voila, San Diego. Why San Diego? Because in our splash screen, we said, well, default city is going to be San Diego. When they first come in, we have to have some sort of default city, which is exactly what happened because we passed that along in our navigation. Wonderful, it's working. Now check this out. Let's go to search. I'm going to say Moscow. Why not? Because we can. Click, we go back, there we go, Moscow, and everything changed. Now, because the way we've set everything up, it goes ahead and says get weather data, passes in the city. Now the city is indeed the city that we've just added, right, in our search bar, and pulls in the information about Moscow. If I go and say, let's say Maputo, like this, click, now it's Maputo, and voila. If I search for something else, let's say Mumbai, and goes back Mumbai, and it's getting the weather information for Mumbai. Great, it's working. Okay, very good. So this is a pretty long video, and I apologize for that, but I hope you were able to follow along and see exactly the process, right? I took my time because I want you to understand exactly how we go about rerouting everything and passing in data, passing in information from routes and so forth, okay? And there you go, it works.